Okay. Great. Thank you for joining another Agile Orlando meetup and coaching Agile journeys. And so this is a dual hosted one. So if you're part of either, raise your hand and wave if you feel like it. We'd love to hear about how you heard about this meetup in the chat. So feel free to post there. I met Jeff in person, although I had read his books. I met him in person in November of 2018 when I was up in Boston for Lean UX training that he was doing. And so I was so excited when it was suggested that he come onto our meetup. And so thankful to have Jeff himself here today, the books that you've written. And but his message today is around forever employable. And there will be time after the meetup from 1 to 1:30 Eastern time if you want to hang on and chat about what you've learned from this meetup or anything else you want to chat about afterwards. So Coaching Agile Journeys has been around for 4 years, and Agile Orlando Meetup has probably been around for about 10 years, started by Mark Kilby and some other fine folks. And just happy to have these two communities coming together to share Jeff's message. So without further ado, I'm going to turn over to you, Jeff. Thank you so much for making your time to speak with us today.
My pleasure. Nice to see you again, and thanks for having me. This is great. Like I said, I see a few familiar faces in here as well, and so, and I know for a fact that at least one, if not two of you have seen this talk before, and so I just expect you to laugh at all the jokes again, frankly, because they're the same jokes, you know, that's how it goes. But I'm super excited to be here and share the story with you. I'm gonna share my screen so you get a kind of see the slides a little bit. The talk's about 25-30 minutes long, and then we can kind of talk about the talk or whatever else is on your mind. But there it is. Excellent. Let me just change my view over here so I can see more of you. Excellent. Okay, so this is the conversation we're having tonight is an interesting one, and you might ask yourself and say, well, Jeff, this doesn't feel like an agile conversation. And to some extent, you're right? I'm not going to talk about stand-ups, sprints, or velocity, or lean UX, or any of that stuff that we talk about, burn down charts, whatever it is. But what I think you'll absolutely recognize in this story are the principles of agility, because those were the driving forces behind the process that I've used to build the business that I have today, and that led to this book, Forever Employable. And it really is focused around the agility of our career, and in many ways, and I'll talk about this in a second again, treating our professional development, our personal growth, and our careers as products and services, very similarly to the products and services that we build at work every day. And if we're going to use lean and agile and design thinking to make our products and services successful, there's absolutely no reason why you can't do that to your career as well. And so let's take a look at that, and I'll tell you kind of my story. So the story starts on the morning of my 35th birthday, which was January 31st, 2008. So now you know exactly how old I am. And on the January 31st, 2008, I woke up in a pretty cold sweat, a bit of a panic attack on that particular morning. And I couldn't figure out why, because things were pretty good overall when I was 35. This is me at 35. I had like 4 more hairs on my head. That was about it. So that hasn't degraded too badly in the last few years. But those are my kids, and they are now 17 and 13, which is terrifying. And they're running around here in Barcelona in the city, just kind of owning the place. But I'd had it pretty good up at that point. I'd had a good run up until that point. I started off as a broke musician in the 90s. Played piano in a bunch of bands, keyboards in a bunch of touring bands on the East Coast. Played down, I was telling Heidi this the other day when we were catching up. I actually played in Orlando. It was a memorable gig. We play a lot of gigs, so they're not all memorable. But there used to be a venue, I don't know if it's still there, frankly, in Orlando called the Sapphire Supper Club. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Anybody remember that venue? No? I can't see the chat, so I don't know if someone's saying yes.
Someone is saying now it's called The Social.
Okay. Well, so I played there in, I don't know, 1990, whatever. And and it was great. And I had a ton of fun. And then kind of as the 90s were coming to a close, I was broke because I was a musician. I had no money. And so luckily the internet came to my rescue, right? The internet saved all of us. And what was cool about 1999 particularly was that if you could spell HTML, you could get a job in 1999. And I got a job straight out of bands, like straight out of, being on stage and in bars up and down the East Coast. I got a job at IXL as a web designer. So doing front end design and development is an exaggeration. It was markup. We were doing HTML. The year's 1999. And I got a job and it paid real money and I was excited. And that really set me off down my path down working in the internet. And very shortly thereafter, I was gifted a book called Information Architecture for the World Wide Web by Peter Morville and Lou Rosenfeld. And that book changed my life and really pointed me in the direction of interaction design, information architecture, and eventually UX design. So finally, after college and years of trying to be a rock star and failing, I had a direction and I'm heading off in this direction and crap, the dot-com bubble bursts, right? Which kind of stinks. And so I bounce around for a few years just trying to make ends meet, but I'm landing on my feet and I'm building a career in UX and interaction design. And I worked at America Online up in Virginia for a while. I worked on the software that came on these CDs. So if you recall getting these CDs, you're welcome. I designed some of this software. And I ended up on the West Coast for a little bit, working in a company called Web Trends as the director of UX. And then about 10 years into my career, I find myself back in New York City as the director of UX at the Ladders. And this is when I'm 35, right? So roughly speaking, this is 10 years into my career. On the morning of my 35th birthday, I wake up, I'm director of UX at the Ladders. And I think I'd had a pretty good run. I'd clawed my way up to middle management at that point. And like I said, you saw my kids, I had happily married, I had a house in New Jersey, a couple of cars, everything was fine. And I wake up in this cold sweat and trying to figure out why this is happening. And it dawns on me that in 5 years, I'm going to be 40. And from that side of 40 was old, right? From this side of 40 is awesome. I'd love to be 40. It's fantastic, right? But from that side of 40 is old. And the further up the ladder I climbed, right, the more expensive I got and the fewer positions there were, right? You can only become, like, especially in design, it was like director of UX, maybe a VP of design, maybe a chief design officer, but those are rare roles. And as that's happening, right, all of these younger designers are coming in to the field and they're better than me, they're smarter than me, they're hungrier than me, they're faster than me, and most importantly, they're cheaper than me. And this really has me worrying about my future employability and being able to provide for my family because it turns out that kids need to eat every day. Who knew? I had no idea, right? Turns out they need to eat every day. And so on the morning of my 35th birthday, I make a very big resolution. The resolution is this. It's like this dynamic of like climbing the ladder and updating my resume and applying for work. It's not going to work for me anymore because I was going to start to lose that more and lose that competition more and more and more. So I was no longer going to look for jobs. I was going to turn this dynamic 180 degrees on its head. And instead of kind of working in this push system where I'm pushing myself into the market, I'm going to turn that dynamic 180 degrees and create a pull system where jobs were going to look for me. That's what I decided to do, right? On the morning of my 35th birthday, that was the resolution I came to. Now, I know what you're saying. You're like, wow, Jeff, that's absolutely mind-blowing. Blows our mind up, right? Pretty crazy. But it brings up some very, very difficult questions that you have to answer right away. And I did have to answer them. So number one, if jobs are going to find me, does anyone know who I am? Because if they're going to come looking for me, they should know who I am. And in 2008, I couldn't answer a resounding yes to that. I've been working, but like aside from a LinkedIn profile, that was it. Why would they look for me, right? What problem am I going to help them solve? What skill sets are they going to come look for? What are people going to know me for that will drive them to come look for me? How would they find me? So we have Google, we have LinkedIn. How would they know where I am, right? Where do I want them to find me? And then ultimately, if all of this is going to work, what kind of work do I want? Right? So I don't want just any jobs coming in or any opportunities. I want opportunities coming in that I care about and that I actually want to do. And so this is the kind of, I broke down the problem into these 4 questions and I began to work towards those questions. Now, the one that really stuck with me initially was, why would they look for me? And I want to pose that question to you as a group for a second here. And I'll open up the chat. I think I can get it in front of me. Yes, I can. Good. And so I want to open up the chat here for a second, and I'd love to kind of see a couple of answers in the chat for a second. Why would jobs look for you, right? And really, if you boil down that question, it comes down to what problem do you help people solve, which is the question I was trying to answer for myself as I decided to create this new reality for myself. And so I posed that question to you, the collective you as a team, and I'd love to see some answers in the chat. Why would jobs look for you? In other words, what problem do you help people solve? If you had to boil it down, what would you say? In the chat. Oh, there you go. I help companies scale effectively. I help individuals on teams communicate with each other, have shared understanding of things they need to know. That's great, right? I help create a thriving community. Right? Exactly. I help you make money by making software, through software that delights customers. I improve processes. I help a team do what they do, but better. Exactly. I simplify things, right? I paint the big picture. Not helping non-technical people understand technology. Exactly, right? This is the kind of stuff. And like initially you're like, well, I'm an Agile coach. I'm a software designer, UX designer. I write code. That's great. That's the skill set, but what problem does it solve? And really, that's where I started to kind of dig into and really start to think about, how do I start to change the dynamic using that experience, right? I like this one. I don't run teams, I help teams to run. That's really good. I hope that's your tagline on your LinkedIn profile. I like that one a lot, right? And so, and that's exactly where I kind of decided to focus in on is what do I help people do? And then use that core value to create a platform around that core value, and then use that platform of recognized expertise and thought leadership and that value proposition that you're writing in the chat right now as a magnet to continuously pull in opportunities. That was the goal. Because what I believe to be true is that expertise plus content plus an audience equals that platform, right? So I've got the expertise. I've been working for a decade, so I've got some expertise and experience. I've got content that I can share, and if I can build an audience around that content, especially around that value proposition of whatever of the thing that I do, I can build that platform. And so I spent the next 10 plus years, at this point it's a dozen years, building that platform. And I've learned a couple of things along the way. First and foremost, I've learned that there are 5 qualities that I found within myself that I needed to become forever employable. And my story, at least, took 5 steps to helping build this platform. And when I add all those things up, what I learned was that I had to treat my career and my professional development as a product or a service. And what that means is that you approach your career and your professional development with a sense of humility and with this mindset of enthusiastic skepticism. So this idea that you can always improve it, that you can always get better, and that you can test and learn your way to continuous improvement. That's what I've realized over time. And the qualities that I discovered in myself to do that were the ones that helped me achieve that. And these are the qualities that I found that I needed to build this platform. And when you look at this, I know what you're thinking, because these are 2 Agile groups coming together, right? Entrepreneurialism, self-confidence, continuous learning, continuous improvement, reinvention. These are Agile qualities, or these are the qualities of agility, right? And that's exactly right, except instead of applying them to a digital product or service, we apply them to ourselves. Now, Heidi, we put together a poll for these folks, right? And so quick poll we're going to launch now. I just want to get a sense from the group of these qualities. Which one do you think your strongest quality? Which one's your strongest quality of these qualities from the folks in the room?
Can you see what's happening in the poll? Because you're a co-host, Jeff. I'm unsure if
Yes.
it's blank. Okay.
I can see that 9 people have voted, and I can see where the results are at the moment. And I know that there's more than 9 people in the group.
If I click relaunch, I'll click relaunch. Because okay, so I'm going to relaunch. Weird.
Let's try again.
Yeah.
There we go. It's
Oh,
flying
great.
now.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks for telling us it went away.
I love to watch the bars move. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Wow.
Okay. But
Wow, I love it. Thank you so much for participating, because we've got, looks like 46 out of 59 folks. So great engagement there. Thank you.
Yeah, we're almost at 80%. So if you haven't voted, take a second or so. Keep it up for another 30 seconds here and see.
If you can't see the poll, then just type the number in the chat if you feel comfortable with that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, we're super close. Got almost 85% of the folks voting. So interesting results, and perhaps not surprising for a couple of Agile meetups. So I think we can share the results with the folks here. Let's see. Yeah, we got 86%. So I'm going to end the poll. Share the results. So you guys can all see the results now, right? And overwhelmingly, this group says that continuous learning is their strongest skill out of all of this. Strongest skill. Super duper interesting. Perhaps not surprising with an Agile group, right? I would expect that to be there, which is great, right? And really the way that I see it is we've got to have a mix of all 5 of these as we look to kind of build a kind of platform that generates these kinds of opportunities. And for me, it required a lot of soul searching and digging deep to really discover some of these qualities. So entrepreneurialism, like I never saw myself as an entrepreneur. My father wasn't an entrepreneur. His father before him was not an entrepreneur, right? Like this is, I was an execution guy, not an ideas guy, but I was in bands, it turns out, which I told you earlier. Bands are startups. They are. You and your buddies get together and you've got a crazy idea that you think is going to change the world, and you pour everything you have into it, and you sleep on floors and you eat ramen and you try to get people to believe in this and invest in it and come along with you. And you're trying to build it. It's a business ultimately. And I helped run the bands that I was in. And so I had entrepreneurial skills and experience. I just had to go looking for it in places that were non-traditional. Self-confidence was something that I learned by being on stage in bands, but I was looking for events in my life that really taught me that I could really manage my way through difficult situations. And one of those difficult situations in my life that helped me build my self-confidence and helped me discover that in myself was the 6 months I spent touring with the circus. Now, since all of you are Florida-based, or the majority of you are Florida-based, I might be telling you something that you already know, but all circuses come from Florida. Did you know this? It's a true fact. They're all the circuses in America are home-based out of Florida. And when I was in the circus for 6 months in the summer of 1995, I had a DeLand, Florida mailing address. That's where the circus was based out of. And I spent, look, and the circus was a weird place. And I got thrown into it to survive. And it's this 200-person community that kind of lives and breathes its own type of subculture. And I had to learn how to make friends and how to be successful in this crazy environment that I was in. And so I leveraged that experience that taught me that I could survive anything. Continuous learning. the thing that you all are very, very confident and comfortable with, right, comes through reading and speaking with others and engaging in community and being curious about what's happening out there. And that's something that I've done regularly throughout my career. So this was a fairly easy one to add into the mix. And those learnings that you pick up help you improve what you're doing. So I mentioned this phrase that I love called enthusiastic skepticism. As cliche as it sounds, I learned it from a TED Talk. And it's a TED Talk by Astro Teller. Astro Teller is the guy who runs Google X, the moonshot laboratory there where they build internet balloons and self-driving cars. And enthusiastic skepticism is this sense that I could always be better at what I'm doing. And that's really where the improvement comes in. So this is a photo from my last in-person class. This is March 13th, 2020. The last time I taught a class not in front of a camera, basically, but in a room with humans. You can actually see, if you look a little bit on the right, I just noticed it in the photo, you can see the bottles of hand sanitizer. So the panic had set in. The full pandemic had not set in. This was in Paris. And the reason why I share this picture is because I taught this class with Jeff Patton. And I do a lot of teaching with Jeff Patton because I learn by teaching with others, and especially when I teach with Jeff. And so the two of us together learn from each other, and we get better that way. And then lastly, reinvention is something that I've recognized has to happen in order to stay relevant as the world and industry and business and technology moves on. And one of the things that I do in that situation is I look for opportunities to take the things that I'm already good at or the things that I already know and apply them in a new context. So I do a lot of work with product thinking and design thinking and customer centricity and OKRs and outcomes. And there are disciplines and departments in companies that have no clue what this stuff is, but can totally benefit from it. And so bringing those ideas to non-product teams like HR and finance and legal and compliance is something that I've been doing a lot of lately, and starting to build some credibility in that space and broadening the opportunities that I create for myself by creating content. This is an HBR piece that was published a few months ago talking about this very thing. And so those are the 5 qualities that I found in myself that I needed to help build this platform. And I took 5 specific steps to get there. And these are the 5 steps that I took. Now, they might not be the exact same steps that you take, but I'm going to share this path with you very quickly and some examples from that path as well. So let's start with step number 1. Step number 1 is planting a flag. Planting the flag means that you're going to decide where to build your platform. What are you going to be known for, right? Why are people going to come looking for me? That type of thing. And when you do this, right, the goal is to become synonymous with the thing that the flag that you've planted. So, there's a balance here of being too general or being too specific, right? So if you're like Agile coaching, well, that's pretty broad, right? Agile coaching for healthcare. Okay, that's interesting. You might want to plant a flag there, right? Agile coaching for healthcare in Orlando, that might be a little too niche. Maybe you want to broaden that out a little bit, right? And so looking for that right scope is a test and learn experimentation. But the goal is, what are you going to be known for? And the people who have done this well are synonymous with their flag, right? So I'll just put up a couple of names, right? So Eric Ries, right? We all know who Eric Ries is, right? He's the lean startup guy, right? Jake Knapp, my buddy Jake Knapp, right? He's the design sprint guy. Like, that's where he planted his flag. Alex Osterwalder over in Switzerland, right? He's the business model canvas and business model generation guy. Outside of this, I have Sarah Cooper, for example. She's planted her flag as a Trump lip sync comedian, right? Like, that's her flag, and everybody knows her for that, right? And that's, the people have become synonymous with that. And for me, I planted my flag with Lean UX, because Lean UX was the challenge that I was solving at the time as a UX designer. So UX is a huge field, right? So you could be the UX guy, but there's a lot there. Lean UX was, hey, how do you do design and user experience design in Agile? Right? And that was a big deal in 2007, 2008, 2010. It's still a big deal today, frankly. I still do a lot of Lean UX work. And I'm the Lean UX guy. Google Lean UX, I'm the first result that comes up every single time. right? For better or for worse, that's it, right? Now, the question you might ask and say, well, look, well, how do I figure out where to plant my flag? And that's a fair question. One of the exercises that I've become aware of and that I've been teaching more of lately is this one. I really like this one, and I didn't even know it existed when I wrote the book. I wrote some questions similar to this when I wrote the book. And then after the book came out, people were like, oh, that's Ikigai. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know it. And so Ikigai is a Japanese concept that means a reason for being. It's why you get up in the morning. And it's basically centered around 4 questions. And the 4 questions are the ones on the outside here, right? So what do you love? What are you good at? What does the world need? And what can you get paid for? And your goal is to try to find answers that tick all 4 boxes. Because if you can find things that tick all 4 boxes, or even just one thing that ticks all 4 boxes, that's a great place to plant your flag. Something that you're good at, you love to do it, the world needs it, and you can get paid for it. That's a great place to plant your flag. It's a great place to start. And so this is a great exercise to run around, to kind of do some Post-it notes with and really try to see where to plant your flag. So I'll leave it there because we could do a whole meetup on this exercise, and I've done that. But just as a place to start, we can do that. So that's step 1. Step 2 is telling your story. So you've planted your flag. Now you've got to go out there and you've got to share your experience and your expertise. And this is where everybody gets stuck. We get into our own heads and we let doubt take over. Everyone has good experience. She has more to offer than I do. My story isn't extraordinary enough to be unique, right? The best part of your experience, though, of your story is not how successful you've been or how massive of a company you've built or how many celebrities you've worked with. The best part of your experience is that nobody else has it. You can tell a story that nobody else can because you're the only person to have gone through everything that you've gone through in that way, right? Only you have your exact perspective. And so this is your opportunity to really share your perspective on the flag that you've planted, right? So here's how I spent the last 15 years building up my career as an Agile coach. No one else has done it exactly the same way, guaranteed. And people want to hear that story. They want to hear your personal touch on things. And that's exactly what I set out to do after I decided that Lean UX was going to be the flag that I planted. I gave the first talk on Lean UX, or on UX and Agile at the big Agile conference, and this might have been in Florida. I was somewhere kind of down on the East Coast in I can't remember where it was in 2010, but this was at the big Agile conference, the annual one. And the date is important here. It's important because this is 2.5 years after my 35th birthday. This stuff takes time, right? It doesn't happen overnight, but I started telling my story here about UX and Agile. The first time I said Lean UX on stage was a month later in Paris at a conference called Euro IA, still 2.5 years later. And I really didn't get my big break for Lean UX until March 7th, 2011, a full 3 years after my 35th birthday. On March 7th, 2011, Smashing Magazine published this article. Now, the reason why that's important is because this was kind of my first really big article on Lean UX and sharing what we've been doing and working on for a while. And Smashing Magazine had 1 million readers worldwide in 2011. And so this took the conversation global. And then all of a sudden, I have an increasing set of opportunities to tell my story to slightly bigger and slightly bigger and slightly bigger audiences. And I'm doing exactly that. I start giving talks. Wherever anybody will ask me to give a talk, I get on stage and I'm sharing my story pretty much in every channel, just to kind of get a sense to run these experiments to see where things are resonating, where my audience lives. So I'm using Twitter and Medium and LinkedIn and Quora and Facebook and MailChimp, and really just trying to find any channel that people will listen to. Honestly, the only thing we stopped short of creating at the time was Lean UX, the musical. We thought about it really quickly, but we decided that this was a bad idea and didn't actually go that way, right? And so in hindsight, the question becomes, well, why did my story resonate, right? So I'm telling my story. Why did my story resonate? I planted my flag, Lean UX, now I'm telling the story. And there's a few things that hindsight really kind of starts to reveal about what makes for good storytelling. Number one is I solved a real problem many people had. A lot of folks were struggling with Agile and UX, and that was something that I was working on, and we had found a way to deal with it, so I was sharing it. I wasn't an academic. I wasn't talking in the hypothetical. I had actual real world experience. I was doing the work. and I was sharing the results of that work. And I was sharing it humbly. So I shared the stuff that worked, and I shared the stuff that flopped miserably. And there was a lot of that stuff. And we talked about why it didn't work and what we learned from it. And that really drives home that authenticity and that connection in your storytelling. Everything that I did provided practical, tactical advice, which is super meta. I'm doing it right now as well, right? Every time you listen to me talk or read something that I write, I want you to take something away, something you can try tonight, tomorrow, next week at work, right? And that really helps to build that authentic connection. So plant your flag, tell your story, and experiment with telling your story. Test and learn the best channels, the best formats, the best lengths to reach the target audience that you're looking for. Now, as you start to do that and it starts to grow, new opportunities present themselves, and you need to start to follow these new paths. And that's exactly what was happening to me. And that was terrifying me because I was starting to do less and less design work. And if you recall the beginning of the story, I was already concerned about my design skills not being up to par with new designers coming into the field as it is. Now, right now, I'm flying around the world, speaking at conferences and teaching workshops. And this is basically what I'm doing and not really doing design work. And I was terrified about this. But new opportunities present themselves. For example, book publishers go to conferences and they look for the latest speakers on the latest topics, and they offer book deals. And I got offered a book deal at a conference to write the Lean UX book. And for me, I decided to jump into that new opportunity because this was the next big thing that I was going to use to build my platform. Except I didn't tell the publisher a very important secret. And that secret was that I didn't know how to write a book. No idea. I'd written like 750 words consecutively. That was it, right? But you jump in and you figure it out because it's an opportunity, right? And so before I move on, I have another question to pose to the group, and I'd love to see a couple of answers, maybe in the chat, or if you feel like it's worthy of unmuting. But maybe let's start in the chat for a second. So what was the latest thing? What was the last thing someone asked you to do that you didn't know how to do? And then how did you do it, right? So maybe start with like, what was the last thing that someone asked you to do that you didn't know how to do? Anything at all in the chat. Not when, Natasha, but what? The 30-second elevator pitch, the 1 minute startup pitch, yeah. Ask the Agile community for help. Interesting. Yeah, someone asking you to do an in-person workshop. I remember Jared Spool, in fact, Heidi, where we met. Jared Spool was the first person to ask me to do an in-person workshop. And I was like, I don't know how to do one, Jared. He's like, I'll teach you. I was like, okay, sensei.
Yeah.
That went well. Yeah, so these are good. Be a parent. I hear you on that one. There are books for that, but it's not really a manual for much. Create a training session, doing an online mini series about getting a job after graduating. Yeah, look at that, right? Tell a story to convince others, right? Writing a business case, right? All of these things are things that we don't know how to do. And as you start to tell your story and the story gets amplified and these new opportunities come your way, inevitably, some of these opportunities are going to be things that you've never done before. And so if you're going to build this platform, you've got to seize those opportunities. Now people say, well, Jeff, you were very lucky to get those opportunities. And you're right. I definitely was very lucky to do that. And there's a lot of privilege involved in that as well. But I love this quote because this quote basically says, look, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, right? And so if you're prepared for these opportunities, so you're doing this work explicitly to generate these opportunities, then you're going to get lucky because these opportunities will show up and you'll be ready to take some of them on. And in this particular case, I did. And as I told you, I didn't know how to write a book and it was brutal. It took me 2 years to get Lean UX across the finish line. 2 years, and there's no research involved. I'm writing from literal, like, firsthand knowledge. I burned through 3 editors, and wrote the manuscript 4 times, start to finish. The only thing really that got this over the finish line was Josh Seiden joining the project as editor and eventually co-author to drag it across the finish line with me at that time. And it was brutal. I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought O'Reilly was going to give up on me. But 5 years after my 35th birthday, basically 2 months after my 40th birthday, Lean UX published, and it changed everything, and it continues to drive opportunities to this day, which is amazing to me. In fact, it's in its 2nd edition, and Josh and I just signed on to write the 3rd edition, which will be out next year. So this is the gift that keeps on giving. So seize these new opportunities, these new paths. Now, 2 more quick steps, and then we'll wrap up and we can do some Q&A. If you would have asked me 15 years ago what I'd be doing in 15 years, the last word I would ever have said would have been teaching. It just would never have crossed my mind. And yet everything I do today is teaching. And what I find is that as I tell my story and as I continue to do the work that I do, the more teaching that I do, the better I get at the actual craft, right? And so I teach workshops and I teach at conferences, and webinars are teaching, podcasts are teaching. What we're doing right now is teaching, guest articles and interviews, the opportunity to share something. It's teaching, and it sounds cliche and we've heard it a lot, but the better that you can teach a concept, the better that you can actually perform that thing, that skill itself. And so the more that you do this, the better you actually get at the craft as well. And this generates more opportunity, which is why I spend most of my time doing this stuff. Now, look, I'm a consultant, and at this point I'm self-employed, and so this is my job at this point. But if you work in-house, there are tons of opportunities for you to test your ideas in-house as well. And there's lots of stuff. This is just 6 things that I came up with that are potential teaching opportunities. But look for those, because if you work in-house and you'd like to stay employed in-house, whether it's your current employer or a new employer, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Building your platform through teaching internally starts to create value around you beyond your job description internally. And that value inevitably escapes the sort of the corporate firewall. People learn about you on the outside, and that might make you more attractive to other employers as well, which creates new inbound opportunities, which is the whole goal of this particular process. So we've planted our flag, we've told our story, we've followed the new paths. We're now teaching our materials on a regular basis, continuing to refine our story, to refine our content. The 5th and final step is to give it all away, which feels unintuitive. It was very difficult for me to learn this, and it's the most recent thing that I've learned because, hey, I've been working professionally for 20 years. I've got experience, I've got expertise, and I believe I should get paid for that, right? And I believe you should get paid for your experience and expertise. And so that's why this is so unintuitive. But what I've learned is that the more you give away, the more you can share back with the community, the more you give back to the industry, the more comes back to you, the more opportunities come back to you. And so to do that, you've got to make your work and yourself easily findable and accessible. Post your work online, articles, webinars, podcasts, infographics, blog posts, slide decks, videos from your talks, whatever it is, and encourage people to reach out to you. Now, initially, you might want to do that on sites that have broader distribution than perhaps your own blog, and that's okay. But just keep in mind that in those situations, you're renting that audience, right? You don't own that audience. So they might still come to you, but ultimately, you don't have control over that audience. Once you start to build that following, start to bring things in under your own in-house, like under your own name. So if you go to my website today, all my stuff there, almost everything there is for free. The only thing that you're paying for is the classes and the books, but articles are there for free, webinar recordings, podcasts, blog posts, resources, templates, downloads, videos of my keynotes. It's all there for free. And yet people still come back and they're like, hey, we watched that video of your keynote on your website, and we'd like to hire you to come give the same talk. It still blows me away when that comes. I'm like, really? I was like, you just watched the video. It still happens all the time. So give it all away. And what it does ultimately, especially, is it helps build your community locally, especially like the kind of stuff that we're doing here with local meetups, right? Is it builds that community locally. It increases your presence in that community. It gives you an opportunity to test your material at local meetups, at a friend's business, that type of thing. And that really helps increase your visibility in that community. So to wrap this up, a few things to remember. Staying relevant means staying active. So the way that you build this continuous platform means that you have to stay active in the community. You have to have a presence in the conversation. You have to contribute to the canon. This is work. Now, it might be a moonlighting job for you. It might be something you do in the cracks between your day job and your family. And I've done that too, and it's in the book and I talk about it. But you have to have a presence in the community to stay relevant. If you're looking to kind of move from one part of the industry to another, or from one industry to another, start the next thing at least 2 years before you'll need it. And that's been my experience, at least. So I showed you earlier how I'm having these design thinking and product thinking conversations with HR and finance and legal. I have no HR credibility. I have no credentials in HR. I mean, I worked the ladders as a job search engine, but beyond that, like, I don't have any credentials there. But I've started engaging with that community about 18 months ago. I've started injecting myself into conversations, writing some blog posts, commenting on discussions on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And what that's done is it's getting me to a point now where I'm starting to see some inbound flow from that world asking me about what I can do to help, right? But it's taken a long time to get there. It's taken me about 18 to 20 months to get there. The path that I shared with you here today is just one path. It's my path. It worked for me. Cherry pick the pieces that work for you, right? You don't have to follow it step by step by step. It might work for you. And then lastly, I'll close with this. As we think about ways that we can continue to deliver value and build these platforms that attract opportunities to us, Bezos, you know, he's a super interesting guy. People always ask him, what's going to change in the next 5 years? And he says, look, I don't think about my business that way. Because I think about things in the long term. I am looking for the things that are not going to change over the next 10 to 20 years. What are people always going to need? The way that I satisfy those needs is inevitably going to change. But the core need is going to stay the same for 10 to 20 years. And as you think about building this platform and kind of becoming forever employable, think about that. And that's why I asked you at the beginning, kind of, what is the problem you help people solve? Because if that problem kind of sticks around for a long time, like I help scale companies, right? Companies will always want to scale. I help simplify tech to non-tech people, right? That's something that will always be necessary, right? If you can find that thing, the way that you capitalize on your experience doing that is going to change, right? The channels, the formats, the media, whatever it is, right? But the thing that you're working on will always be the same. And that's how you can really help build this platform and ultimately build this forever employable way of working. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for having me. This was a blast. I really enjoyed giving this presentation. The book's available for sale now. So if I convinced you that there's a good story in there, it's pretty short. It's about 30,000 words, not too long. It's on sale on Amazon, so you can grab a copy there or anywhere, really. It's on sale anywhere. And then I will ask one tiny favor, that if you do decide to buy the book and read it, if you could review it on Amazon, that would be terrific, because reviews mean a lot in a variety of different ways. So with that, I'll shut up for a couple minutes, see if you got any questions, and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much. Anyone want to unmute and ask the question or type it in the chat? While folks are thinking, Jeff, I did want to share the suggestion that you had for internal in-house folks to start testing their ideas in the company that they're in now. I actually started doing that. So I was hired on for one role 3 months ago, and I found working with this other group super interesting. It wasn't part of my day-to-day job, but I had time because I was onboarding, and they encouraged that to go and work in different parts of the company. And then I started helping with workshops and helping other folks with innovating and iterating on their ideas. And then they finally decided that that was an actual job and that they needed me to stay there. So so I just moved into my new role as an innovation product manager.
Amazing.
So it can be done, right? So that's what I tell folks, like write your own job description. If it's marketing you want to get involved in, like just, find a way to work with the marketing folks and offer your valuable insights to marketing, or whatever it is, right? Whatever angle you have inside your company.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And look, and look, there are going to be situations where there will be risk with your full-time employer. Absolutely. And you need to be sensitive to that. And you need to be aware that some organizations are not going to value uh, this kind of moonlighting activity, despite it creating a positive halo for the organization. And then the other, and so you should be aware of that and pay attention to it. But at the other end of the spectrum, you've got organizations that actually have jobs like this. So like tech evangelist, right, at Microsoft always comes to mind, right? What those people do is they go around and, share their expertise about Microsoft technology, and that's their job. So that's a pretty good gig, in my opinion.
Yeah. So someone did have a question. How do you accelerate the time to getting known?
It's a great question. I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, it took me a long time, right? I think you need to find. So, at the risk of sounding like a fortune cookie, you need to fish where the fish are, right? And so this is an exercise. It's a design exercise. Everything's a design exercise, especially when you're a designer. But it's a design exercise, right? Who's your target audience, right? So who do you want to get known by? Let's identify those folks. And then let's make some assumptions about where you believe those folks consume content and hang out, right? And then go and validate that assumption. And so if you can figure out where folks are hanging out, where folks are trending towards hanging out, right? That becomes a good practice to try to increase your exposure more quickly. So for example, like I don't do anything with Twitch or Discord. I do very little on YouTube. I should do more. But like a lot of these sort of channels that I hate to say this because I feel like an old man saying this, but like I see my kids hanging out on are legitimate channels, right? So there's lots of folks who are doing live streams on Twitch, running conferences on Discord, right? It's just tools that I haven't used yet. So really try to get a sense of where your audience is and where they're headed. I think that becomes really interesting, especially kind of a younger, more millennial audience is probably more amenable to things like Twitch and Discord and other services like that. So to me, that's what I would do. I don't think it's a silver bullet here. I think it's a research and experimentation exercise.
So along those lines, one of the questions that's in the chat is curious about cross-posting to a variety of channels. And so is that part of the inspect and adapt piece that you're talking about to try the similar content or the same content in other channels? Do you have any advice around that?
Yes. So the short answer to your question is yes, exactly that. So I do that now. So the form factor matters, and the nature of understanding the channel and how it works matters. But yes, so that's a great way to experiment with. Is my audience on Twitter? Are they on LinkedIn? Are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? Are they on YouTube, Twitch, or Discord, or whatever it is, right? And testing similar ideas in different formats is a great way to test the concept and test the channel. So yes, absolutely. And again, these can be very, very lightweight experiments, right? We're not talking necessarily about a heavy investment in a home YouTube studio or, lights and cameras and that type of thing. Although we're all in the video production business these days, aren't we? But so yeah, so like I should have it hanging around here. Here, I'll show you. So sorry, it's $20 tripod, and it's only $20 because it's twice as tall as the $10 tripod, like literally. And so $20 tripod, put your phone on it, point it at your face, and talk for 3 minutes about something and put it on YouTube or put it on Twitter or put it on wherever and see what happens, right? As with our products and services, the goal is not making the thing. The goal is changing the behavior of your target audience, right? It's an outcome. And so we should set some success thresholds for ourselves, right? So for example, look, you're gonna have a hypothesis that says, I'm going to reach Agile coaches in healthcare on YouTube with 90-second clips about how to coach Agile teams in healthcare scenarios. Okay? And I'll know that I know that this works when I get 100 subscribers to my YouTube channel by the end of the year. Right? That's a great hypothesis. Now you can go out there and you can then spend the next month trying different types of YouTube videos, different kinds of promotions, different kinds of sharing, to see if you can build up a following and of 100 subscribers, right? Or maybe you want a minimum of 50 views per video or whatever it is, right? Some kind of behavior change. If it doesn't work, well, you can do some more customer research. Go talk to people who maybe watched your video and say, hey, you watched it, but you didn't subscribe. Why not? Well, production quality was crap, or whatever. Who knows what they'll say? But that's the kind of thinking here is yeah, absolutely inspect and adapt.
Along those lines, and thank you for sharing that, we've had some concern expressed in the chat about how you would maintain that kind of social media presence. Do you have any advice around good routines or habits, how you might do that?
Sleep is optional, I suppose, although less so these days. Yeah, it's really difficult. Sorry, that's the downstairs doorbell. My guess is that's dinner being delivered. I live in Spain, by the way. It's dinner time here, so it's getting close to dinner time. In any case, look. So initially, I fit this stuff in the cracks, literally in the cracks. So the cracks are, I'm standing on the platform waiting for my train to New York, right? I've got 40 minutes on the train with my headphones on so I can do some writing. I'm sitting at the doctor's office and it's going to be a little bit of a wait. I'll tweet something, right? Literally, like that was the routine at first, because I had a full-time job and I had a 90-minute commute each way and I had 2 little kids and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? If it starts to succeed, so today it's my job. And so for me, there's still a routine in there, right? I still try to block out time to write, and this is becoming really difficult. So there's a couple ways that I've tried to do this. Protecting that time is the most difficult part of the whole thing. But I've tried to block off Mondays and Fridays from meetings. That's failed. More successful on blocking off Fridays than Mondays. I've tried, I think the next experiment I'm going to run is blocking off half days. So basically doing sort of like, this is like a creative morning, a making morning, and then a managing afternoon, and then like a managing morning and a making afternoon. So there's an old Y Combinator post about the maker's schedule from like a decade ago that basically describes that. And so find that right routine that works for you. Generally speaking, I'm a morning person. Generally speaking, my family isn't. So on weekends, the time between when I wake up and they wake up usually is mine. So that's a good time to be creative. I don't know. I mean, this is definitely an experiment, but that's what I've tried.
Thank you.
So what are you doing in Spain?
Living, eating tapas, going to the beach. I live in Barcelona. It's we just, the business that I built, and this is part of the benefits, I suppose, of it, is it's location agnostic, especially now. Doesn't matter where you are now. That's completely irrelevant. But 3 years ago, it was still, my business was sort of everywhere, not in a specific place. And so I just needed a good place, an airport and some good internet. And we decided that we were going to move abroad. We just couldn't decide where. And so we inspected and adapted. We experimented with a different city for a month, once a year over 4 years. So we actually did 5 cities in 4 years, as it turned out. And Barcelona was the winner in that. And we love it. We absolutely love it here. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Jeff, I've got a quick question, and it kind of goes back to your original sort of point, and you were 35 and you woke up in a hot sweat. And it's the thing I keep on thinking about, this balance between humility and humanity and drive and sort of competition. And the balance between home life and work. And also an experience I had where I tried to give some things away, and I had a phone call. Someone phoned me up and said, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this talk for free?" And that sort of balance between humanity side of it, but the sort of the competition side, and how you sort of, and maybe you're nodding a bit to Barcelona, but how do you kind of square that off? How do you balance those two things and find something that works?
Well, look, I don't think it's competition, right? Although, I mean, look, there's definitely, I'm not going to lie, there are definitely situations where I'm like, wow, that person did really well with that blog post, or something like that. Right? Or their book sold so many copies, right? There's definitely a little bit of that. I mean, I'm human after all. But generally speaking, the person I'm competing with is myself. My goal is to ensure that I build a sustainable business and that I create a continuous flow of opportunities. The proving grounds so I operate with a tremendous amount of humility, but I'm not afraid to test my ideas in public. And so, for example, I wrote a blog post a week or two ago on psychological safety that's doing really well. And I was like, okay, that's a really good one. And then I wrote a blog post this week that came out early this week about the variability in solutions, right? So solving problems are unique, solutions are infinite type of thing. And that was not doing that great. And I thought it was a great blog post, right? And so I'm not afraid to put stuff out there and kind of see what resonates and see what catches on. And if it flops, try to understand why it flopped and learn from it and get better at it. So that's, to me, the only way that I'm, look, the most serious way that I'm failing is if I'm not provided for my family, right? But the only way that I'm kind of disappointing myself is if my outcomes don't improve over time, year over year, really is the goal I'm looking at.
Thank you. Any last quick questions before Jeff has to drop off?
Vicki, all that stuff is coincidental. None of that stuff is planned whatsoever.
Oh, you can't convince me of that, Jeff. I was just noticing or commenting in the chat. Yes, I love that. That is so cool. So since you are a designer, I am curious, did you create the logo or did you give thoughts?
I didn't. I hired a book cover designer to do it, and he came up with a few ideas, and I had some thoughts about which one was best, but I wanted to validate my assumptions, and so I did a survey with my mailing list, and this was the overwhelming winner. So
nice.
Yeah, it's a very nice one.
Cool.
Awesome. I am going to stop the recording